Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be making this combination gun in Blender. If you don't already know, a combination gun is an older style of firearm. It's basically a combination between a shotgun and a rifle. As you can see, the top barrel is chambered for rifle rounds, the bottom barrel is chambered for shotgun shells. Thought it'd be an interesting model to make, so that's what we're doing today. Let's go ahead and get started. Kicking things off, I went ahead and imported an AI-generated base mesh.
You what?
Now before you burn me at the stake, this is not going to be the final model, but I have found it handy for using it essentially as a 3D reference. Very convenient for lining up different vertices on very odd shapes and curves and things like that. Getting started, we're modeling the forend, which is where your forward hand rests when you're holding the firearm. And just starting with a basic outline to get the shape that I want. With a wireframe outline created, I start filling it in with some basic and simple geometry, trying to keep the topology as clean as can reasonably be done with a kind of an odd shape like this. After getting the topology to be somewhat clean, I moved on to adding the inside edge where it actually rests against the barrel. This was, as you can see, a bit of effort to get the topology to lay cleanly, but we got there in the end. After finishing connecting all the faces together, we went ahead and applied a subdivision surface modifier to make it nice and smooth, and it looks pretty good. At least in my humble opinion anyway. Next went ahead and mocked up some barrels, nothing too crazy. I'll end up coming back to these later to dial them in and make them look nice and pretty. The next piece on the agenda was making the stock, which doesn't seem too hard until you look at it for a second and realize it's kind of a funky shape. Trying to take it a little bit easy on myself, I decided to make the grip section first before moving on to the actual stock that inserts into your shoulder. I definitely leaned pretty heavily on my 3D reference for this one, but once I had the basic outline, I was able to fill it in and tailor the shape much more to my liking. And with a little bit more adjustment of the edge loops and a subdivision surface, we have ourselves a nice looking stock. Sadly, I couldn't rest on that success too much as there's a lot more to model. And the part that I was dreading the most was here, which was making the receiver. It is a very odd but very specific shape. I was able to use the 3D reference for the outline, but pretty soon had to switch to using some 2D images to really make sure that I got the curves and the shaping of this thing correct. It took me a good minute to get it right so that it looked good. But in the end, with some persistence, we were able to get there, and I think the result doesn't look half bad. I was able to reuse some of the geometry from the receiver to make this hinge bit that attaches to the forend. This is actually what allows the action to open so you can actually load and operate the firearm. So that was convenient. Anyway, while I was rambling, I went ahead and moved on to making the trigger guard, which is another very kind of odd and specifically shaped part. Was able to use the 3D reference to get the outline, but then had to lean pretty heavily on just manually making it by hand to try to get this geometry to cooperate. Took a second, but with some more patience and perseverance, there's a theme with this thing, we were able to get something that I think looks pretty good. With the basic shape of the trigger guard modeled in, I was able to install the trigger itself, as well as this push-through safety, which was really just a simple cylinder with some basic shaping on the ends. Nothing too hard. I was also able to add in these rivets to the side of the receiver. There's the one big one up front, which holds the hinge in place for the action to open, and two smaller pins on the back to hold the trigger in place. To complete the trigger assembly, I modeled in the top of this hammer. I probably could have modeled the whole hammer, but I was lazy and didn't want to. Next up was the action lever. This is what you push to actually let the action fall forward, because otherwise you'd have to hold it in place, and that probably wouldn't end very well for your arms or your fingers. The fin on the back of the lever has this interesting kind of checkered texture to it. You could probably do this with a normal map or something simple and straightforward that I didn't do, and instead just modeled the whole thing with actual geometry. But I think it looks alright. Went ahead and added a hole for the selector switch that lets you choose between firing the top barrel for rifle rounds or the bottom barrel for shotgun shells. And finally remembered to go in and add that stock plate. I forgot about that earlier. Next thing up on the list was adding in the sights on the top barrel. I don't remember the exact name for this configuration of sight, and I can't be bothered to Google it, but basically you have a short fin up at the front and then a flat plate at the back with a groove cut in it. You put the front sight in the gap in the rear sight, and you're pretty much pointed at whatever you are wanting to eliminate. To round out the exterior details, went ahead and modeled some simple sling mounts. These are just cylinders. They're not too special. With pretty much all the rough geometry made, I went about the task of applying all my subdivision modifiers and making sure all the edge loops made the geometry look nice, pretty, and hopefully professional. With the subdivision added for the most part, I remembered that I hadn't quite finished those barrels, and then I should probably go back and actually dial them in, especially if I want this thing to open, as you can see me trying to do here. I don't think it would go over well if you opened this up and it was just a hunk of solid steel with no holes or detailing applied to it anywhere. So that was my next task, was adding in all the little bits and pieces to really model these chambers out correctly so that it looks right when the action is open. Modeling the actual chambers wasn't too bad. The only tricky bit was modeling this little piece here, which is called the ejector. Basically, this holds on to the lip of the cartridge at the back and has a spring behind it, so when you open the action, it will shoot the round out, or at least allow you to grab the spent casing so that you can throw it out yourself. It's a bit of a funky curved rectangle thing, but thankfully I was able to get it done and duplicate it to use on both barrels. I ain't doing that again. After getting the chambers to a place I was happy with, I realized that the top barrel should probably have rifling, since it is in fact a rifle barrel. I did not know how to do this, and I tried a lot of different things. Pretty much all the pauses you see at this point in the time-lapse is me trying in lots of frustration to figure out how the heck do you make a spiral out of straight lines and vertices. I ended up playing with a couple different add-ons, watching a few different tutorials until I actually found something that worked for what I was doing. This initial attempt that you're seeing now did not work, it sucked, and it was terrible, and I deleted it promptly after making it. What ended up actually working for me was using a screw modifier on a very specifically shaped plane that basically gave me this kind of twisted cylinder that I was after. I was able to use that mesh to cut gaps into it so that I could actually have the rifling that looked like rifling and not just strands of spaghetti dripped down the barrel. After finally figuring that out and applying all the subdivision surface modifiers and getting the mesh to actually merge together correctly, because I applied my array modifier wrong the first time, I had a rifle tube that I was able to insert into the barrel. And finally, with all the pieces put together, I decided to call it good. As you can see, this finished model does have a scope mounted on top, but that's going to have to be its own video as it was a fairly complicated process, or at least it felt like it at the time. Probably wasn't actually that hard. But I'm fairly happy with how this turned out. Geometry is nice and clean, a lot better than what the AI spat out when I gave it the reference image. Yeah, definitely a piece I'm proud of. I'll have to do more old school stuff like this again. Anyway, for those of you that are still here, thanks for watching. Hope it's been an enjoyable experience for you. If you are interested, this model is available for sale on my CG Trader page. You obviously don't have to buy it, but if you do, it does help support me, and it shows what people like and what people think is poopy. Helps me know what to make in the future. So anyways, thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good one, everybody.